Hi, folks. To start off our American Lit survey, we start at the beginning. But where is the beginning? America started and was founded in 1776. Well, yes, but there were plenty of people here before that, including Native Americans and settlers. And when did the concept of being an American really start? Because for a long period of time before, the founding of the country, uh, most people who lived here still considered themselves Dutch or English or French. And then you had native peoples who, were also members of distinct and individual tribes. There it was really a continent of many different cultures. Um, before we even really had words for what an American was. And we start our American literature story at this point with Iroquois creation myths and the native oral tradition. And you've already read your native about the importance of the native tradition, and you've also read a transcribed version of the origin of stories from the Seneca tribe to give you an idea of what the oral tradition is within Native culture. But I want to preface this assignment with a little bit of context for why we start here, what we're looking for, and why this is important to the overall literary understanding of American literature. So, all literature is tied to culture. You can look at any story from any point in time, and it is going to tell you directly or indirectly about what people were thinking, talking about, scared of, hoping for, concerned about in that particular time period. Some people, or John Green famously called literature sort of mental time travel because you're able to see the world um, from another world, from another's eyes. And oftentimes these are worlds that are centuries old. And that is true of all American literature. It is always tied to the things that are going on in the progression of the nation. Now, in the earliest days of the nation, you are all probably familiar with the story of the Indians and the Pilgrims or Native Americans and early settlers. You're probably familiar with the first Thanksgiving story, with the idea with the Mayflower and Columbus coming over, and there was a lot of conflict, and you've heard that story. It's very pervasive in the cultural zeitgeist. And it's which is not to say that it's a falsehood. There was a lot of conflict and there was a lot of strife between these meeting groups in the days of colonial America. Um, However, the literature, particularly the literature that you're going to read in this first story set, is going to give you a much more in depth and complex look at where those cultural conflicts between Native Americans and early settlers started. So, what is a myth in literature? You might think of a myth as a falsehood, which myths are generally considered to be, parables, so, sort of fantastical or made up. But in literature, the important thing about a myth is that a myth is central to a culture or a cultural identity. So all cultures have myths. And these cultural myths are foundational to cultural values, beliefs, morality. These are how people make sense of their place in the world, particularly creation myths. Creation myths explain how the world came to be, what people are, what our purpose is, what our place in the world is, what our place in the universe is, what our relationship with the creator is. That's what creation myths do. And in the US, the Judeo-Christian creation myth, or the story of Genesis, is largely influential with our cultural understanding of those things. And I just want to be clear here, I'm not talking about um, faith. I'm not talking about, whether you are a member of the Christian faith or whether you practice differently. That's separate from what we're talking about here, because whether you are a member of the faith or not, every bank in the country and every government building is closed on Sunday. And why is that? Well, because Sunday is a day of rest. And why is that? Well, because of the Judeo-Christian creation myth. So when we say that they're foundational to a culture, this is what we mean. It's not a matter of believing in this in faith or anything like that. These are just stories that are so entrenched in how we understand each other and our place that they are cultural markers. Um, and for most people in the US, the Judeo-Christian myth is that story. But you're going to be reading 5 different versions of the Iroquois creation myth. So the Iroquois, or the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, is the oldest democracy in the world. The Iroquois Confederacy was founded in 1142 by the Great Peacemaker, and it was a joining of 5 nations. So there are 5 nations under the Iroquois tribe, and those are the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, the Seneca, and the Mohawks. Now they did add a 6th nation. Some years later, but we're only reading the 5 nations versions. And you're going to read the creation myth from each of these 5 Iroquois nations. And while all of the creation myths are similar, I mean, they're all the same story, there are really interesting differences in the details. And remember, myth is central to a culture. So you want to think about how those differences between each story might affect the specific nuances in cultural beliefs or values or understanding of, morality, mortality, how the world came to be, of those sorts of things. So to use a analog from the Judeo-Christian myth, in the story of Adam and Eve, there was, the tree of the forbidden fruit that Adam and Eve were not to eat. Eve was tempted by Satan in the form of a serpent, and she ate from the forbidden tree, and as did Adam. This is known as the fall of man, the original sin. This is how, humans are, or people are believed to be susceptible to shame and sin and pride. And this is, also, if you're a member of faith, to believe to be the reason for a savior, right? So the fall of man is pretty important to the overall uh, creation myth there, right? Well, in the Iroquois myth, we have a similar fall, and that happens with a figure that's known as Sky Woman. However, in each of these 5 versions, the way that she falls or descends to earth is very different. And so you want to think about, well, if the fall of man in the Judeo-Christian myth is so essential to how we understand, sin and salvation and, these evil and things like that, well, how do these little differences affect each version of the Iroquois story? Um, you also want to think about how this overarching story of the Iroquois creation myth compares to what you understand to be the early settlers version of the creation story, or the Judeo-Christian creation story. Because remember, most settlers had come to the New World. They had left everything they had never ever known. They had spent 6 months on a boat, and about half of people on that boat would die before they got to the U.S. They risked everything to get here in pursuit of, in many cases, religious freedom. So their faith was very important to them, as it is to most people, and their perception of the world through their creation mythology and through their worldview is so profoundly different than the native uh, worldview that you will see in these creation myths. So you want to think about, how does this differ in man's relationship to nature, in man's relationship to a creator? Is there a creator in these stories? How does this differ in terms of punishment, in terms of sin, in terms of good and evil? What are the sort of cultural beliefs and values that you can take away from this overarching creation myth? How does that compare to what you understand about the settlers, and how would that inform the cultural conflicts of that period, which are sort of the jumping point for, the next several centuries of cultural conflicts that fuel American literature? I look forward to hearing your thoughts on these different versions of the creation story. Don't forget to provide your annotations throughout the text. You have 6 across the 5 stories, you are encouraged to leave more. Further engagement, so likes, responses, etc., will increase your perusal points. So those are always good. And don't hesitate to at me or drop in questions if you have anything that you would want to draw my attention to or like clarification on as you're reading. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this.